I think Livramento was my man of the match, and I didn't know that you were allowed to walk your dog or take pets onto the Wembley turf, but he clearly took Mo Salah for a walk for 90 minutes yesterday. Like here, puppy, sit. No, be a good boy now. Sit down. Sit. Come here.
Uh,
Heel.
You know,
Life was so good a week ago when I could be like, just be a humble guy. I'm like, hey, it's fine. Hey, we're not really winning. Hey, it's
reduced fixtures in the Premier League means it was the Carabao Cup final, and ha ha ha, Liverpool lost. Welcome to the corner flag. I'm Amog.
I'm Mukesh.
And I am Newcastle's greatest ever fan.
Ha ha! Welcome to the show, Joe Morrison. Again on the corner flag, a long-time friend of this podcast. You've been with us through the highs and the lows. And today, Joe, we are with you in the highs of Newcastle United beating Liverpool in the Carabao Cup.
Boo.
What are you booing for? Get out. Get out.
I think within the first minute for this podcast to get cancelled, that has been the
Yeah.
quickest way to get this podcast cancelled. A lot of people, I'm sure, will be like, "Oh, how can you say that?" Now, well, I'm doing the same thing, but you're over the moon. I can tell, Joe. We spoke earlier today. How does it feel for Newcastle to end their trophy drought after what, 20 years?
Is it really
70?
a 70-year drought?
70
70.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, 70 years. It still feels weird. And the reason it feels weird is because we've been to a few finals in recent years. Obviously, the Carabao Cup final itself 2 years ago, lost that. When I was working with Newcastle United, we went to a final and lost. BBC days, I went to a final and lost. That was the FA Cup. So it's bizarre because I feel I should be sitting here going, well, we tried and hey, so close yet again. Yet we're not. I keep going online and checking. Did we just... Let me just type in again and make sure. I'll look at another website and just check, So that's what it's weird. It's a bizarre feeling.
Is it because you were not at Wembley, Joe? May I put that to you, because all the other finals you were talking about, you mentioned that you were there.
No, I wasn't there 2 years ago. And by the way, a lot of the Newcastle fans had drank so much in Covent Garden in London that they were there in body but not in spirit. So yeah, like an out of body experience. So no, I wasn't related to that.
Let's get into the game. Mukesh, 2 goals, and just one late consolation for Liverpool, but that wasn't really going to change anything. Dan Burn getting the goal, hometown hero, of course, for Newcastle, and that man
What a
Alexander
story.
Isak. What a story!
Yeah. I mean, isn't that every fan's dream of their club?
Yeah.
Like that you have a local hero who scores the winning goal in the final of a cup. Isn't that? I mean, that's the stuff that we grew up on.
Ending 70-year drought. I feel like I just keep telling myself that to console myself that it's okay.
Yeah. How many days has it been since you last won a trophy, Mukesh? Tell me.
About 300 about 365 days, I think.
One. It has been 1 day since we last won a trophy. You see.
Well played, Joe. But yeah, Dan Burn again getting on the score sheet. I was following the match on my phone, and when I got that notification, I went on and logged on to start the stream. I was like, oh, this is a game that this is not Liverpool just plowing through another side and getting their first silverware of the season. This is going to be a game. And then Alexander Isak, man, you cannot stop that guy.
I mean, look, going back to the Dan Burn and the boy's own story, it's not just the fact that he's a local boy. When you go back and look at his story, it is the most wonder. I mean, they'll probably write a book or make a movie about him one day. Released from an academy, which is every young talent's nightmare. Released from an academy, was stacking shelves in a supermarket, a store. Came through the league ranks, like climbed up the pyramid as a player. He's got his first call up to England at age 32, his first goal in the Champions League at 29. years old. It's happened so late for him. When we consider how many, look at Lamine Yamal there,
Yeah.
who, playing in a Euros at what was it, 16 or 17?
16, 17, yeah.
And then you have at the opposite end of that spectrum, here's a player who scores the winning goal in a cup final in his 30s. I mean, he doesn't have that many years left. That's the nature of being a professional football player. So the backstory, aside from the fact that he's a local lad, is just a wonderful tale. And I think that it just encapsulates the whole romance of yesterday and the weekend.
Don't you think that after winning this trophy, after scoring at Wembley in a cup final against Liverpool, who were, let's be honest, the favourites for this piece of silverware, you think he's going to add a few more years to his footballing career? Because that'll do that. Feeling like this will do it for you.
I'll tell you what. I know that you're saying that half in jest, but there's a hugely serious element to it, which is, and I was discussing this recently with a former player who used to play for AC Milan, actually. And they were saying about the burnout, the mental burnout. Players are breaking into, let's call it the senior squad. It's such an early age now.
Yeah.
And then obviously the money that comes with it. They're getting to their mid-20s and they've already been playing at the highest level for 10 years. We just talked about you. Lamine Yamal. They get this mental burnout because they've been there, they've seen it, they've done it, and they're only 25, 26, 27 years old. So I think because he's acquired all that so late, I think that he will have that hunger, desire, love for the game a lot longer than most do, where they just fall off a cliff in their early 30s, and go, you know what, I've had enough.
Yeah, no, and like we said, he's at his boyhood club. He's at the club that he supports. So I think that's definitely, enough vitamins, enough caffeine, whatever you call it, to be injected into his veins. Let's look at it from the Liverpool point of view. Mookie,
Why? What's the point?
Because poor guy, he's been silent for a very long time, and I feel like
just like his fans at Wembley, eh?
Yeah, just like that. But where do you think Liverpool lost the game? Did they go into this game already thinking that, we've got this in the bag already?
They sleepwalked into the game.
No. Honestly, I don't think Liverpool fans or Liverpool players were overconfident at any level. I think they've just been burnt to the ground because Slot, I don't think, has rotated his squad. Maybe you could say that he doesn't have a good enough squad, given that we've seen how Nunez and Diaz have been playing for the last couple of games. So I really don't think it came from a place of overconfidence as much as just exhaustion. Like, this is not a squad it's a squad that's been playing 80 to 90 minutes for every game this season.
So let me ask you, Mukesh, do you think then in that case that Liverpool psychologically have been absolutely rocked this week? Losing to PSG, knocked out of the final of the Carabao Cup, and then, by the way, they can't go straight back onto the training pitch tomorrow and rectify it because it's an international break, so they're going to be losing half the team, scattering to their various international squads. Do you think there's a wobble coming now? And remember, first game back after the break is who? It's the derby. Everton in the derby. I think they could be hitting a real sticky patch right now.
I actually think the international break might help just because players will get that little bit of rest.
But they won't. They're on international duty.
I know, but there's at least 6 to 7 players will get rest. Right now, I think not enough players are being rested. I think also you probably shake the games off a little bit. Like, I think maybe traveling, spending some time with family is my
basically
what you're trying. I'm an atheist, but for the next 2 weeks.
Basically, what you're trying to say, Mukesh, is that they'll get a break and a rest from being in the depressing environment that is Liverpool. That's basically what you're trying to say. Luis Diaz is going to go to Colombia, Mo Salah is going to go to Egypt and be like, thank God this is not Anfield. Thank God. Thank God I don't have to see Arne Slot's face.
I think everyone's going to be like, sorry, I'm just being in a very hateful mood, but I think everyone's going to be like, thank God I don't have to see Darwin Nunez. I think that's really it. Because I really don't think I think right now, the broad sentiment is that he's probably the most hated player in Liverpool books right now.
Oh, right now?
Yeah.
This is a new development?
I think they're going to have a wobble. And because their lead at the top of the Premier League is so great, I can see them just crawling over the finish line literally with a little bit of that points gap
I
intact.
have always been a pessimist, so I don't even think that's going to happen. But my general sense of optimism comes from the fact that I do think this 2 week break will be a good thing for Liverpool because it shake off. I think even psychologically, other teams, like when you catch a team that's shook, you're going to play a little harder. But I think when you catch them 2 weeks later, the mood's gone, the vibe's gone. Maybe the party in Newcastle will still be on, but I can say that in Liverpool and around Merseyside, it probably won't be that.
I think it's going to be fascinating what's coming. They've got who is it? They've got Leicester City. I think the game after, which are fighting for their lives, relegation. Fulham. They've got coming up. Fulham that did well at the weekend. I'm not
fighting for their lives is a little. It's a little generous to describe what Leicester's doing, but yeah, they're doing something.
Well, they're in the relegation zone, so they are fighting for their lives.
They're barely fighting.
I think what Mukesh is trying to say is that they're barely fighting. I mean, let's be honest. Manchester United beat them 3-0. So they're really bad.
Another relegation candidate.
I mean, listen, put some respect on our name. We're 13th, all right? Far away from relegation.
Let me ask you this question. It's more to you, Mukesh, than anyone else. But let me ask you this question. Do you think that Liverpool aura has been cracked in the last week?
For sure. I definitely think the Liverpool aura has been cracked. And it's been cracked, I think, for the last... I think in the second half of the season, it's been cracked a lot harder because, there have been dips. There have been a lot more highs and lows. I mean, of course, there was a period of 4-5 games where they took their resounding lead from, I think, 4 points to now to 12 points. I think that aura has been cracked a little.
I mean, let me put it this way. Do you think that if the Leicesters or the Evertons or the Fulhams would have played Liverpool 2-3 months ago, that they would have had this mindset that, you know what, after watching Newcastle, we've got a chance. We've got a chance now. I don't think they would have had that in their mind 3 months ago. Those teams, Fulham, Leicester.
I think where
Everton.
people are probably overestimating Liverpool's fall or the crack, right? While I do admit there is some element of a crack and there's a psychologically being shaken up, is that ultimately they lost to PSG, probably the best team in the Champions League right now, on penalties, right? It was over about 210 minutes. It was still equal. Of course, PSG people.
But wait a second. Let me stop you there. Like the first leg, PSG should have thumped them.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm not saying that.
I won't dispute the second leg, but the first leg, PSV should have been 2 or 3-0 up after that first leg.
Sure, but I do feel like Liverpool also played pretty well, and I don't think you should. I think the narrative that if your defense does really well or if your goalkeeper does really well, oh, that's not a good enough game. I feel like that's a little unfair. And as goalkeeper represent, I do find a little unfair that you write off a game as, oh, Liverpool got lucky. That one, hey, your attackers turn up for some games, so do your goalkeepers, and you take those games.
Can I ask you a question, Mukesh? Why did Mo Salah not play yesterday? Was he injured or?
No, listen, I will not take this Mo Salah slander because I will tell you. For me, no, I will tell you what's happening, right? And I think teams have realized that Nunez, Jota, and Diaz are useless. They will do everything but finish. So they can just park 2-3 defenders on Salah and completely nullify him and take complete risks with the other 3 attacking players, which is exactly what's been happening. That Salah has been overcrowded out of the game. And if the others really did turn up, right, which probably was not the case when, say, Mane and Firmino were playing some 4-5 years ago. The problem here, I would actually very specifically pin it down to the attackers. Chiesa scored a goal. Harvey Elliott is scoring a goal. That means and I'm not disrespecting their talent. They are very talented, but that's the bar which was all just required, and that's how low the current Liverpool first team attackers are, other than Salah, that they're not able to just get a shot on target. I think he had one shot on target, or one shot, I think, in the first 45 minutes. So
yeah,
I really don't. I think Salah's been crowded out of the game.
I think Livramento was my man of the match, and I didn't know that you were allowed to walk your dog or take pets onto the Wembley turf, but he clearly took Mo Salah for a walk for 90 minutes yesterday. Here, puppy, sit. No, be a good boy now. Sit down. Sit. Come here. Heel.
Life was so good a week ago where I could be be a humble guy. I'm like, hey, Hey, we're not really winning. Hey, it's good. We just get top of the table.
So couple of things that I wanted to bring up, and I'll get to Livramento and
I hope the
Newcastle's.
tables don't turn anymore.
No. I'll get to. I wanted to talk. This is nothing to do with the final particularly, but about Newcastle and their transfer business as a whole. So that's where Livramento kind of comes in. I'll get to that. But before that, you mentioned Diego Jota in the list of attackers at Liverpool who are not playing well, who are not finishing. Now, up until about, I would say, 3 months ago, Diego Jota was widely considered to be one of the best finishers in that squad, if not in his country, right? For
Yeah,
Portugal also.
definitely in the squad. Yeah, yeah.
He has been one of the most consistent finishers. And even early on in the first half of the season for Liverpool, whenever Jota did come on and play, he was guaranteed a goal. It was that good. Now, the problem is under Slot, he never got the minutes.
No, he
Injuries.
was injured. He was injured.
No. Regardless of the injuries, like when he was out injured, that's fine. But when he was fit to play, he didn't get as much time on the pitch as he should have, or as a forward
No,
player of
completely
his
wrong.
caliber should
Completely
have.
wrong. It was his problem was that he was great, and then he was injured, and then he couldn't play more than 20 minutes, 30 minutes a game, and then that's it. That was the issue. He was always, even if not the first choice for all games, but he was always a preferred.
Let me
striker.
ask you this question. Let's
I hate
assume
this
for a second that he's
already.
fully fit all the time. Fully fit. Is Diego Jota world class? Liverpool are always there or thereabouts in the final stages of the Champions League. They're always there or thereabouts in the final stages of the Premier League. They're currently top of the Premier League. And even in recent years when they haven't won it, they've been there or thereabouts. Is he world class? Is he a point of difference? We're talking about Mo Salah, how Mo Salah can win you a game. Would you say the same about Jota?
No, I don't think he was a point. He's been the point of difference that he was supposed to replace the likes of Mane and Firmino. I don't think he is that.
Has he ever been the point of difference?
I think he was. I think he was a point of difference. He is a very clinical striker. He has had his moments, but definitely not at a consistent level where he not only stays fit but also in the games where you can count on him to produce, say, the magic when the others don't. He's had those flickers, but not over extended periods of time.
And my point is, I think sometimes you have to be ruthless. And I think if your team, your club, your team are world class, they're in the top 3, top 6 teams in the world, but your striker's not, I think you have a problem. You've got to cut him loose.
Yeah, and we have.
And I think he should have been cut loose years ago.
We have 2 strikers over there. We
Yeah.
have a striker who can't take a penalty, so that's where we really are.
But so this is going to be a big problem for Liverpool next season, because with the way the squad turnover is going to happen at the end of the season, it's not looking good, because it's looking likely that Trent, Virgil van Dijk, and Mo Salah will leave because there's no news on them signing contract renewals. So they're probably all 3 of them going to go on a free, which is again like it just sucks for Liverpool that 3 players of that stature are going to leave on a free. Apart from that, Darwin Núñez is probably going to be sold. Luis Diaz, very recently the reports came out that he may be allowed to leave as well. We're just talking about Diego Jota, who should have been cut loose a while ago, like Joe said. That's your entire attack that's going to be let go of. And 2 very, very key parts of your defense. Even Andy Robertson is towards the end. He's on his last legs. They're looking at Kirkes to replace him, but that's an entire squad overhaul, and that is going to be a big challenge for Liverpool next season, because if they win the Premier League this season, I think this is Klopp's Premier League trophy in spirit. Like he is watching over this. He is watching over this side. This is his side. Arne Slot hasn't done anything.
That's a little unfair. I think you're not. I mean, I understand that there's definitely an element of Klopp in this team and in the way the team plays.
99% of this team is Klopp.
Sure, but the way the team plays now is it's I would say compared to Klopp's final year, and that could have been due to squad restrictions, etc. This team plays a much better and calmer football over 30 games or 35 games. Klopp did say even in his final 2 years.
Let me give you a different perspective, and this sometimes gets overlooked. Flip the whole thing on its head. Tell me if you think the competition for Liverpool winning the Premier League has been up to the standard that we've seen in recent years. So if you go through those teams just behind, in particular Manchester City, would you say that Slot has been challenged as best as he could be challenged by the rivals? Have they been at their peak this season?
I mean, I feel like you could say that, okay, maybe the teams, you could do a mental experiment and be like, hey, teams this year weren't as good as teams last year, because last year there were 3 teams challenging for the title, and this year there's probably about 2 teams, maybe a half if you count Arsenal as probably not fully there, but half. But you're only going to be able to solve the problems you're given. You can't hold him against, but given that he has been faced with these problems, and given that he's been given this problems set up, he's done really well. Given that he's also not been given any new players, he's only had his own coaching staff.
But this is what I'm saying, and this is where I'm disagreeing, Mukesh. What problem? He's been handed a very lucky deck of cards, which is the challengers have been poor this season.
If that was the case, then all of you, which is everybody who's not a Liverpool fan, would have said like, hey, Liverpool would have been a top contender for the title this season. But at the beginning of this season, not one pundit, not one fan, not one Liverpool. Most Liverpool fans also did not expect Liverpool to be challenging the title. Everybody was like, Liverpool.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mukesh. But I'm trying to flip it. I'm trying to flip it on its head and saying, did those same Liverpool fans expect Manchester City to be as bad as they have been this season, or Arsenal to basically not have a striker this season?
Yeah, we expected Arsenal to be shit. Please, come on.
Yeah, true.
Come on.
Three things in life are guaranteed: the death, taxes, and Arsenal bottling a championship.
Yeah, true.
Come on. Okay, it's not like, oh, when they had their fittest team, we were still like 9 points ahead. So what is this? Like, what is this debate even?
Yeah.
Shit. I hope I don't regret to say these. But to end of April, I'm like, what happened to the 12-point lead?
Clipping this for posterity.
No. So I think it's very unfair on Slot to be like, oh, he got an easy deck of cards, because I think if it was really that easy, then former players, former pundits, former managers, everybody would have given him that benefit of the doubt, and nobody really did. And I think if you really watch Liverpool play this season, one second, they've had, I love teams that win 2-0 wins. Like, I think that to me speaks of team in control, teams that plays the right amount of attack and defense. And Slot, I think, has had 9 or about 10 2-0 wins in the league, which to me tells me that he's got, like, while Slot had a very good way of attacking, I think he pretty much didn't know how to control or kill games as well. I'm saying in the final 2 years, in the second phase or second half of his career, whereas Slot just has not had that problem. I think to bring in that defensive calmness, to make your players not run, like I think Liverpool players in the last 2 seasons, when after 20 games, they were done. Because they're running so much, whereas now they're winning more duels. It's a little more compact. So I think Slot has done tactically so well. He's honestly, I would go so far to say that he's made better in-game substitutions than Klopp, right?
Okay.
Especially this season. I mean, especially last few seasons of Klopp. So I think Slot has done really well. But given the fact that he was not given any players except for Chiesa, I think it's actually sensational what he's done. And honestly, it's okay to lose to PSG, especially on penalty. I mean, especially to Darwin Nunez, and you're like, okay, everyone knew Darwin Nunez was going to miss. But I think losing to Newcastle has really been the only damage to the ego, I would say.
Let me sum it up. Or the future of Liverpool. Let me sum it up really quickly. Right, United in their absolute heyday, when they were a powerhouse in English football, wore Nike kits. The minute they switched to Adidas, it all went downhill. Next season, Nike is not going to be the Liverpool kit sponsor from next season onwards. Liverpool are going back to Adidas. I rest my case. The writing's on the wall. Let's see what happens. But if you're as superstitious about these tiny things as I am, my man Mukesh, you're going to know what being a United fan over the last 10 years has been like.
Listen, championship is where it's at. That's
we'll see you there. I want to go back to Newcastle now for a bit. Joe, what I was trying to get at with Livramento, for example, is, and I was having this conversation with Akash just earlier today.
Dog walker extraordinaire, Livramento.
Yeah.
The highest paid dog walker on the planet.
So Akash had something interesting to say. He was like, it's and Akash being an Everton fan, he's very self-righteous about football, etc., etc. We won't get into that. But what he was saying was, oh yeah, Liverpool beating Newcastle, Newcastle beating Liverpool is great, but again, it just goes to show that if you get uh, oil money, you can win silverware in about 2 3 years, and etc., etc., etc. And what I told him was, it's not the same. Like when we saw Abu Dhabi take over Manchester City, the kind of signings that they made in their early years of ownership of that club were ridiculous. Like, for example, Robinho coming to Manchester City was something that nobody would have expected, but it happened, and it didn't work out is a different thing, but they always flexed their financial muscle. But with the PSR rules, that's not the case. Newcastle has not been able to flex their financial muscle and buy top level stars as much as clubs in the past have. Even Chelsea under Abramovich had that phase where they were going out and buying the top talent. That's not the case with Newcastle. Newcastle haven't gone out and got a top tier manager. They've got Eddie Howe. They didn't get top tier defenders. They got Livramento and Trippier, who I thought were fantastic signings. With the kind of budgets and the kind of money that they were allowed to spend, I think they were very, very shrewd signings. Alexander Isak, I think I don't know how much you guys paid for Isak, but again, a very, very shrewd signing. So how do you see that changing, Joe, as the tenure continues under Saudi? Do
And
you
do you
see
think?
any?
Sorry. One more question. Do you think Isaac is going to stay next season?
Yes, I think he will. Yeah. Well, actually, there's a caveat to that. Yes, I think he'll stay, depending on whether they get Champions League. And I think after winning the Carabao Cup, I think it has given everyone a lift and a boost, and the confidence is oozing through them. And I think that should drive them to the finish line to get one of those Champions League spots. So yes, I think he'll stay. If they're not in the Champions League, it might be a different question. Sorry, what was your original?
No, I was saying, how do you feel the transfer
Yeah.
strategy is going to continue under this ownership, and are we going to be able to see any big name signings? I mean, I know you've got Guimaraes, you've got Tonali, you've got Isak. I think those three are the top tier signings that Newcastle have right now. But apart from Isak, you wouldn't call either two of them top tier or world class elite level signings. They're great signings, but you wouldn't put them in the.
So you wouldn't put the Newcastle midfield in the top midfield Premier League midfields?
I would.
Right. So then who's in that Newcastle midfield?
Correct. But I'm saying as a marquee
you've got Tonali and Bruno. Like, there's two players that I think would walk into any other midfield in the Premier League now.
Sure. But I'm saying as marquee signings go, because if you think about, and especially if you're not fans of that particular club, you see a club get investment from wealthy owners, and you think, okay, now they've got the funds, now they're going to go into the market and get the best talent that they can. Of course, I mean, we all joked about how Mbappe was going to come to Newcastle when the takeover went through.
Yeah.
But do you see something similar happening? Obviously not Mbappe, but the next level of player.
No is the answer, and I'm quite miffed about it, to be honest with you, because it was a reactive policy that was brought in by the Premier League. It was literally like the top clubs who'd already got their, as you put it, marquee signings when, oh, wait a second, we don't want a challenger who's got deep pockets. Let's pull up the drawbridge and shut the door. Yeah. We're okay. We're in the lifeboat, Jack. But you guys, if you want to all of a sudden bolster a squad, I'm trying to remember, one of you can probably type faster than me and Google it. I'm trying to remember the young talent that they were forced to sell in the last week of the transfer window last summer, who everyone is saying, like, with it, probably this season would have been in the first team. But Newcastle were forced to sell that player to balance that PSR that you're talking about. That's scandalous, really. It really is, that a club that of Newcastle's stature, and I'm talking about financial, not just the club as a legacy and history, were forced to sell a young talent that good simply because of this PSR system, which was implemented after the Saudis took over. That makes me angry. And then to compound that anger, I have this other beef, which is, if you go back through history, the damage that's been done to football clubs, and I'm talking about Premier League clubs or English clubs in particular, any clubs, but let's call English clubs, has been debt. And I don't understand why it's not about, does this sponsorship deal, is that the true value of it? Are you tweaking the rules here? Or what I think it should be, which is, I'm sorry, you should have a cap limit on the amount of debt that a club can carry, because it's debt that makes clubs go bankrupt. It's debt that forced Portsmouth from being a Premier League team to falling down through the leagues. It's debt that forced Leeds from being in the Champions League in the late 90s to falling down through the leagues. It's debt that's the problem. And then, of course, that begs the question about Manchester United and all their debt. It's debt. We had an interview just last week with the part owner of Manchester United, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, saying the club would go bankrupt in November. That's shocking.
Yeah.
That's shocking. Yet, go and look at the revenues of Manchester United. They're probably in the top 3 in the world, if not the top in the world. Maybe it's Real Madrid have just pipped them this year, but they normally vie for 1 and 2 spot, Manchester United and Real Madrid. So if you're looking at it from a pure revenue perspective, money in, money out, then there's nothing wrong with Manchester United. They're bringing in huge revenues. But wait a second. The club was going to go bankrupt by November, according to Sir Jim Ratcliffe. So it shouldn't be about sponsorship deals and true value of sponsorship deals. It should be about how much debt clubs are carrying. So to answer your question, angry, just a little bit.
Yeah. Let's quickly move, because you brought up Manchester United. Let's talk about that really quickly as well, because that interview was staggering, and I take Sir Jim Ratcliffe's comments with a pinch of salt. He is. I wouldn't be naive enough to consider him to be the most truthful person, especially in front of cameras. He is a billionaire businessman at the end of the day, and you don't get to that position without lying through your teeth in front of cameras and saying the right things that need to be said. So a lot of the things that he says, I feel, are to garner some sort of public support or some sort of fan support and ease his early years into his part ownership of the club. So while I don't agree, I do still believe that yes, the club was and still is in a bad shape financially. But you're absolutely right, Joe, because the debt is what kills these clubs, and it possibly would have killed Man United as well had Man United not been as big a brand as it is. But what do you do? And if you were Jim Ratcliffe at this point, how would you address it? Do you think that the cost-cutting measures that he's taking, taking the free lunches out of the cafeteria, giving Marks and Spencer's vouchers as Christmas bonuses, is that the right way to go about it? Is that just a drop in the ocean?
Well, first of all, I think he's made a huge mistake by buying a stake in the club. It's 25%, isn't it?
Yeah.
25% of the club.
I think he's made 29 now.
29%. I think he's made a huge mistake. It should have been all or nothing. And this is where some of the deals, or some of the prospective deals with the Glazers, have fallen apart, because prospective owners have come in and said, yeah, we'll buy the whole club off you. Okay, we'll have a little bit of an arm wrestle about the value, and we'll get to somewhere in the middle. But then the Glazers at the last minute have said, oh, and by the way, we want to keep 10%, or we want to keep 20%, or we want to keep 25%. Well, I'm sorry, if I'm a billionaire businessman who've run very successful businesses, I want total control. I don't want to have to go to the Glazers to answer for every receipt that is picked up by the club.
Yeah.
I think he's made a mistake. I think at the very least he should have had controlling ownership. So let's say the other way around, flip it, 75%. I mean, obviously there's implications that come with that, because you're almost into a forced takeover of the entire amount. But anyway, we'll park that for a second. So first of all, I think he's made a mistake. Secondly, I only see this ending badly because of what he said after that interview with Gary Neville to another publication or media outlet, which was, if the abuse gets too great, I'll walk away from it. Mm. Well, he is now the lightning rod for the damage that was done by the Glazers.
Yeah.
So you can talk all you like about the bad optics, and that's what I think it is. I'm sorry, I don't know, whoever they hired as their PR firm needs taken out into the street and shot.
Yeah.
They really do. Because if the overriding element is about taking lunches off of the canteen staff, or denying payments, minuscule payments, £40,000 in total per year it was, for players that played in the 1960s and 70s when the wages weren't that high. then you've got your optics badly wrong. Because, by the way, we're watching that orange guy in America who's doing something similar, but the optics are the absolute opposite. People are going around talking about how can a 350-year-old person still be receiving social security checks? No one's talking about the damage that they're doing to some little guy in their big sweep through. Yeah. So again, it's about controlling the narrative, and they haven't done that. And here we're at them talking about the minuscule things which do look like penny pinching, but the other things are trying to prevent the club from going bankrupt in November. Yeah. So I think he's partly right. I think he's partly wrong. I think it's going to end in tears. I really do, because I think it's already turning to custard. It's becoming a little bit messy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't mean Lionel.
Yeah. United, of course, did beat Leicester City 3-0 in the late kickoff last night on Sunday night after the Carabao Cup final. Bruno Fernandes masterclass. I think he has taken Roy Keane's comments on him or his criticism to heart, and I couldn't be happier. Yeah, like he's
but the problem is you need 11 of them.
Yeah, unfortunately.
You know, when it comes to the day, I mean, Sir Bobby Robson, God bless his soul, used to always say to me, said, an absolute maximum bad day, you can carry 2 players out of your 11 if you want to get something out of the game. If you have any more than 2 players that you're carrying, you know, because they're having a bad day, or maybe they're carrying an injury or not quite, you know, every player has an off day. Yeah. Any more than that, you ain't winning the game. It's as simple as that. Well, Manchester United's problem is they're not carrying 2 players every match. It's no good talking about Bruno. They're carrying 4 players, 5 players every game who, coming back to what I was saying about Jota, the same principle applies. How many of those players walk into the starting 11 of either side of a Champions League final matchup, whoever the 2 teams are in the Champions League final? How many of those players walk into that starting 11 between Team X, Team Y in this year's Champions League final, last year's Champions League final?
I think Johnny Evans walks into a Champions League final squad for sure.
What have you been smoking?
Nothing, actually. I think that's given me the clarity of thought. That's why kids do drugs. No, it was a fantastic result. So well played by Bruno Fernandes. I feel like finally, and I know I always say this whenever United put through a good performance, I feel like Amarim's tactics are kind of showing like they're working, and Mukesh is already laughing because he knows what he has to say.
You have said that for Mourinho, you have said that for Ole, you have said that for Ten Hag, and now finally Amarim. I mean,
let me ask you a question. If many of the Manchester United fans I'm talking to love Ruben Amorim and say similar things to what you're saying, which is we can see what he's trying to do. Okay. Let's just take that as for granted for a second. Would you be prepared to back Ruben Amorim even if Manchester United were relegated to the Championship? Would you be prepared to stick with him?
Yeah, because I started following this club when Sir Alex was in charge. And so that has always been the principle that I have followed personally as a football fan, that the manager is...
No, I'm not asking you, I'm not questioning your loyalty to the club. I'm questioning your loyalty to the
manager
himself.
To the manager, yeah.
No, but okay.
The manager...
None of the other managers that followed Sir Alex took them down to the Championship. So let's just assume for a second that they go down to the Championship. Would your loyalty stick?
Yeah, if they went down to the Championship. Ruben. No, so if they went down into the Championship under Ruben Amorim in his first season at Man United, or his first half season at Man United, which is this season, I would follow him into the Championship. However, if they drop down to the Championship at the end of his second full season or third full season, then that's a deeper problem. So I will always follow and back a manager till the very end, till I can see that the situation has become completely untenable. And there are so many Man United fans who did the same thing for Mourinho, who did the same thing for Solskjaer, who did the same thing for Ten Hag as well. All good managers in their own right. Now, why it didn't work out for any of them is anybody's guess. My blame, again, goes to the top management and the ownership and the way the club is structured. Because the environment is such at the club right now that any person in that role is destined to fail. It did not happen in the years where the Glazers were owning Manchester United and Sir Alex was in charge, is because Sir Alex was such a big personality that he was able to carry the club in his own image till his last day as manager of Man United. But none of the other managers who have followed suit have that aura or have that connection to the club, and therefore they are destined to fail. The
You
minute
see,
things go wrong, the players turn, the fans turn, the ownership is always ready to pull the trigger in order to save their own asses and say that, oh, look, we made a change. Now we've got this guy, he's got fresh ideas, and this is the club that we want to be. This is the type of football we want to play. And that will go on for about a season and a half till the tide turns and the results don't go your way again. And it's the same cycle over and over again. So it entirely depends. To answer your question, it entirely depends on at what point in his tenure we see this hypothetical situation come to fruition.
I'm going to throw something in there. The most successful periods of, let's call it, recent history of top flight football in England, I'm talking about the Premier League period, have been a duo. It's been a double act. And I think everyone talks about Sir Alex leaving and literally the collapse of Manchester United. I don't think enough credit is given to David Gill. You think about the most successful years of Arsenal. It was Arsene Wenger and David Dean.
Yeah.
You look at the most successful years of Chelsea. It was Jose Mourinho and Peter Kenyon. They were great double acts.
Yeah.
And I don't see that double act at Manchester United at the moment. I just don't see it. No. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. Everyone talks about Sir Alex. Oh, we lost Sir Alex, and that's why it's never been the same. I think David, and you know the reason why? Because they played off each other. They were a counterbalance to each other. The skills and the USPs that Sir Alex brought were not the entire skill set required to compete at the highest level in the world. But David Gill brought the other elements of the skill set, and between the two of them, they were able to do that. In particular, the recruitment and all the rest of it. He was that counter to him, and that's where I fear for the likes of Ruben Amorim and other managers, by the way, not just him. But that's where I fear for them. There's not this synergy.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be two. It was, legacy was two, but that two or three people.
Yeah, which is why I don't fear for Liverpool that much, because I do still trust Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes to take Liverpool, maybe not to, even if not winning titles regularly, at least consistently put them in Champions League.
But Mukesh, do they have the synergy with Slot?
Yeah, they do. Which is why I think, because Slot was they handpicked him, they did research over him for about a year or two before Klopp left. Which is why I think it's not going to be as bad for. I agree with you. I do think you need someone on the recruitment, the executive side of football, and maybe I have not yet heard of a figure like that for.
I mean, we were hoping that would be Dean Ashworth, but that didn't work out. We're sorry, Joe. We're sorry, Newcastle, for that entire fiasco. Took him away from you just to sack him.
No, I think it's worked out best for all parties, because you found him out from a Newcastle perspective. He hadn't been in post very long, and you decide to look over the garden fence and climb over into your neighbour's garden. That tells me a lot about the character. Many things in football, because obviously I've interviewed Sir Alex a few times, I've met him a few times, I had lunch with him once. A lot of things when I'm kind of going, the motivation. I think, what would Sir Alex do? Would Sir Alex jump ship after a short period like Dan Ashworth did? Even though Dan Ashworth wasn't the manager, he was the director. Would Sir Alex have thought that was loyal? Because remember, one of his mantras was loyalty and commitment, and then karma has come along, hasn't it? And Manchester United have shown the same loyalty to him, i.e. none.
No, but honestly, that's very, very true, because when the Ashworth news started circulating that United were interested in him, and it was reported that he was talking to the Newcastle hierarchy to get them to release him from the contract and work his way out, immediately alarm bells went off in my head as well. I was like, yeah, he did a great job at Brighton. Brighton's recruitment under him was fantastic. But he's only been in the Newcastle job for 5 minutes and he's already angling for a move. That's not cool.
And by the way, in the Newcastle job under the new owners, which are bringing a new broom, bringing huge finance. If it was under the Ashley era, I would go like, you know what?
Yeah.
He's probably just had enough of the nonsense every year and, trying to find pennies down the back of the sofa. I get that. You just get tired of that after a while. So, but very different. It's, the prospects were positive for Newcastle. In the future. I think it's panned out exactly. Karma.
Karma is great. All right, on that note, it is time to end this episode. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining us on this episode. It's been a pleasure talking to you as always. If you'd like to get in touch with us and let us know what you thought of this episode, you can reach us on our social media. Joe can be found on Instagram at
I don't know. One Joe Footy.
One Joe Footy.
Twitter. Get me on Twitter because I love the chat. You can't talk on Instagram. That's for people who want to take selfies and pictures of their dinner, Twitter. Twitter is where you can have an argument. And I've got one final question for Mukesh.
Yes.
The gap on the final day, the final minute when the whistle blows at the end of this season, what is going to be the points gap between Liverpool and everyone else?
As a pessimist, I will still say it's going to be a 3-point win to Arsenal.
3-point win to Arsenal, you're saying?
What? Whoa, stop. I'm confused. No. No. So the table on the final minute of the final day after the final whistle blows at the end of the season, Liverpool are going to win the title by how many points?
Okay, no, just jokes apart, I do feel like it'll be about 4 to 6 points. 4 to 6 points, I think it'll be a fair...
1 point.
No, 4 to 6.
Goal difference.
He's wobbling.
4 to 6.
Right. And for more of that, Chad, you can find Mukesh on Instagram at
Mukesh Manjunath.
And you can find me on Instagram at Amogdandive. You can also follow the Corner Flag on Instagram at @CornerFlagPod. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@CornerFlagPod, or subscribe to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your pods from. Shout out to Kazad Gurda for composing our theme tune. And until next week, it is goodbye from us. Say bye, Joe.
Cheerio, guys.
Say bye, Mukesh.
Bye, guys.
Very sad, Mukesh. And it's bye from me.